Hi everyone, my name is Theodore Hom. I'm here with Mindclef, and today we have a special guest, Christopher Still. He runs a project called Honesty Pill. In 2007, he was the principal trumpet of the Colorado Symphony, and then he studied at New England Conservatory, and he's now part of the LA Phil. Christopher, thank you for being here with us.
Pleasure, Theodore. Thanks for having me. Hey, everybody.
Let's just jump right into it. You have a really busy schedule. You're part of the LA Phil. How do you maintain a well-rounded, healthy daily life with your insane schedule?
What makes you assume that I am maintaining a balanced, healthy life? No, I'm kidding. I mean, it is a lot to balance work, family, and a job. But one thing that one of my colleagues mentioned once was considering the emotional cost of doing business. And I heard him say that, and I thought, what an interesting concept, the emotional cost of doing business. And I started to think a little bit about what that meant. And it might mean different things for different people. But for me, the way I interpreted that concept was how far into the red zone, the red line, is your mental energy, your engine revving when you're doing anything. And that could be giving breakfast to your kids, it could be practicing, it could be driving to school, it could be doing homework, it could be giving a concert. Where is your mental energy being spent? And what I discovered when I asked myself that question was, and like most musicians, you can probably all relate to this, we really want to do a good job. We want to make everything as perfect as possible. And so when I was applying that way of being to my music, it was great and it worked out really well. But I developed a habit that I think a lot of musicians develop, which is getting overly anxious about perfectionism with everything in our lives. And that awareness helped me sort of calm down and realize everything's okay. Everything is an evolution. You're doing a really good job with what you're doing. And it lowered the emotional cost of doing business for me. And I can't tell you that I have a perfect work life balance because I don't, but I feel like I have achieved a level of balance that enables me to enjoy my job and be a good husband, a good father, a good colleague, and enjoy my journey as a musician.
So you're sort of saying just sort of find a balance of having a good personal life and how like still trying to be the best musician that you can. How do you draw that line then?
Well, it's not easy. The way I draw it is usually by stepping over it and realizing I've screwed up and I have overbalanced or overthought or over worried about anything that I'm doing. And then I say, "Oh, look at that, I did it again." The cool thing about that is you can then recognize patterns and then start to see them before you enter those patterns and say, "Oh, I have a concert coming up and I'm getting all worried about it. What if I miss a note? What if I don't play great?" And you have to stop and ask yourself, what's the worst that could possibly happen? And when was the last time you had a performance that went really badly? Probably not for a long time. And even if it was a performance that didn't go well, what was the worst thing that happened? In fact, nobody even notices sometimes because everything feels worse to us. So, noticing patterns of behavior is probably a really good first step in identifying where you are getting stressed out or letting anxiety run your ship.
I see. Do you have like maybe affirmations that you tell yourself or something beforehand?
It's a great question. I have used affirmation practice in the following ways. And I'll preface it by saying most of the thoughts that we have as human beings are negative, and most of the thoughts we have are repetitive. That's kind of a bummer, right? But the reality is, most of the thoughts that we have all day long, I think the number is like 80% of the thoughts we have are exactly the same or similar to the thoughts we had yesterday. And most of those thoughts are negative. So there's like these squirrels running around our brain telling us you're not good enough, imposter syndrome, you don't belong here, you're too young, you're too old, whatever.
Mhm.
So my attempt is to try and balance that out with some positive affirmations so that when those squirrels start running around my head, I can't get rid of them. They're there. I'm a human, but I can start to tune my radio frequency of my brain to more positive things like you deserve to be here. It's okay if you make a mistake. Nobody's perfect. Things like that. So I do have some affirmations that I've used, and in fact, there's some specific affirmation practices you can do. Repeating the same affirmations 108 times a day for 40 days, for example, it's pretty powerful stuff, and I've done that in the past.
Oh, what are those? Where were you?
Well, I can tell you one of them that I've used, and they're going to be different for everybody because the squirrels in your brain might be telling you different things than mine. But one of the affirmations I used recently was here it is. I am aligned with the energy of wealth and abundance. I'll repeat that again. I am aligned with the energy of wealth and abundance. So, what does that mean? Wealth and abundance. I don't mean like material things like money. I mean a wealth of health, a wealth of love, an abundance of calm. All the things that I want to draw to myself. Notice the affirmation doesn't say, I have abundance or abundance is easy for me. I'm saying I'm aligned with the energy of, which means sometimes I can feel that way and sometimes it's not as clear. It's kind of like a radio signal as you're driving through a tunnel. You're still tuned to that alignment, but the signal isn't always totally strong. The point of affirmations is training your brain to default to those positive affirmations, even when you can't hear the signal, and trusting eventually the tunnel will end. You'll come out the other side and you'll be able to be receptive to that signal again. It's a little bit, Southern California woo zone stuff, but I think our brains are pretty simple in this way. They react to the information that we give them. And like I said earlier, most of what we give them is repetitive and negative. How about we change that and start putting some positive things in there instead? See what happens.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's sort of what we strive for with our project. We want to sort of remove this connotation that you have to be really tough on yourself in order to be really successful, because there is like you do have to be very meticulous when practicing, and being meticulous does overlap with uh, I guess excessive harshness. But I feel like there is a middle ground where you can be tough on yourself without ruining your own mental health. I think going into auditions, performances, and sometimes just practicing, we can all like really just lose motivation. And do you think those affirmations that you're talking about really help you with your practicing, or do you do something else to keep yourself motivated, especially when things might be going your not be going your way?
Yeah, I love that question. I don't think the affirmations help specifically with my practice. I think the affirmations help more with my mindset and also how I'm going to start my day. Because, when you first wake up, your subconscious mind has had an opportunity to kind of process things and it sort of like clears out the system. It like empties the cache for the night. And then when you wake up, you have a split second before your brain starts to focus on all the squirrels because they're ready for you. That is a great moment to do an affirmation practice or a meditation practice, or even listen to a pre-recorded meditation or something to start your day off keyed that way. It doesn't really help me with my practice though. What helps me with my practice and tying in everything we've talked about so far, as far as being a happy human being, finding balance between my work and my life, is how long should I practice? And how do I know if I'm doing a good job? That's a huge question. I hear that a lot. How long should I practice? Or how long should my kid be practicing? I hear that from parents. Well, the answer to the question, if you don't think about it, is, well, practice until you're exhausted. Okay, well, I don't like that answer because I don't want to be exhausted. Okay, practice until you hit a wall and you have diminishing returns and you can't do anymore. All right, still don't like that answer. What if we said practice until you've achieved your goal for the practice session? Oh my God, wait a minute. I'm supposed to have a goal when I sit down to practice? Yes, you have to have a goal. If you're practicing with a goal and you're not achieving that goal and you're getting frustrated, that is a signal that you need to move the basket closer. The goal is too far away and you can't get there. You've got to take a smaller chunk. You've got to simplify things, make the goal smaller so that you can achieve the goal within 10 or 15 minutes of practice. So to recap that, and I see this mistake with musicians a lot of the time, have a goal and then align your efforts with that goal. Because if you show up to practice without a goal, you're just spinning your wheels. You're probably playing things that you sound great at already. That's not going to help you get better. And you're going to practice until the point where you get exhausted or frustrated, and then you've slipped into the negative frequencies. And
Mhm.
that's going to activate those negative mental thoughts and trigger anxiety and all that other stuff that musicians are so familiar. So to finally answer your question, no, the affirmations don't directly help my practice, but realistic goal setting and creating a metric that says, did I achieve that goal or did I not for today, is what helps me have effective, hopefully satisfying, hopefully productive practice sessions.
It sort of curbs the, negative self-talk that you have when practicing, like, oh, I can't achieve this, but you sort of bring it down. Um, but that could also be a little frustrating, right? Like feeling like you can't reach your goals, so you have to bring your goals down. What would you say in response to that?
Well, I don't think it has to be frustrating. So here's an example. If I handed you a basketball and I said, all right, I want you to make a basket. I want you to shoot a free throw. And I put in front of you, right in front of you, a Fisher Price child's basketball net. And I said, okay, Theodore, can you make the shot? Do you think you'd be able to do it? What percentage of comfortable feelings would you be having out of 100%?
Fairly confident.
Give me a number.
Uh, 90%.
Totally. Like it's like right there, boom, into the basket. Okay. So now I'm going to take the Fisher Price basket and I'm going to move it to like 3 feet away. How confident are you? Where's your number now?
80, 90%.
Okay. Now I'm going to put it across the room in the corner, 50 feet away. How about now?
50 feet away.
It's a big room.
40%, 50%.
Exactly. So now I'm going to take you down to Staples Center in front of 1,000 people, 10,000 people on a regulation NBA basketball court. We're going to stand mid court and I'm going to ask you to make that free throw. What's your percentage now?
0.
Zero. You're going to drop that ball and walk off the court. Like, no way, not doing it. So, this is what I mean by moving the basket. If your goals are so far away, like the Staples Center basket, that you're not even going to try. Yes, of course you're going to get frustrated and you're going to come up with all sorts of limiting assumptions that say this is impossible. I am not good enough. There's no way I can do this. Yet if we stay at the first scenario with our goals where it's just so easy, well then you're never actually pushing the envelope and figuring out where you need to get to. So your job when it comes to goal setting, and this is for practicing or anything else in your life, is to start close and easy, and then incrementally move the basket away until it gets just outside of your comfort zone. And I mean just like a fraction, half an inch, 6 inches outside the comfort zone. That is where the real work gets done. And the minute you start to feel those negative feelings of frustration, move the basket in. That is the trick with setting goals that will be impactful and sustainable. Self-development is a marathon, not a sprint. There's no shortcuts. And if you want to get through a marathon, you have to understand efficiency and you have to understand pacing and have strategy. And those are some of the things that I try and incorporate when I'm coaching musicians on auditions, for example. Let's set some realistic goals so we can maintain the positive energy. Let me ask you a question, actually. What do you think your number one resource is?
Um, Interesting question. Does knowledge count as an answer?
There's no wrong answers. I'm just curious what your answer is.
I'd say knowledge and gaining knowledge.
That's a great answer. I have a different answer, and I think it's one that actually encompasses all the answers I've ever heard in my life for this question. I think our number one resource is enthusiasm. Because once you lose enthusiasm, it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, you won't be motivated to do anything. So we have to protect our enthusiasm for whatever it is we're doing so we can sustain the marathon that is self-development. And one of the ways we can protect enthusiasm is by being efficient and realistic with our goals while still pushing ourselves just a little bit. And that's that perception of moving the basket.
See. Yeah, so you're mentioning like coaching and auditions and when beforehand, the practice, you have to move slowly and precisely without, ruining your mental health. Um, what about going into the audition? Because I'm actually, I think I'm pretty confident in it now. I've sort of had a lot of practice, but I know for a lot of people, they do like hundreds of auditions, and still every single audition they feel nervous going into it. What would your advice for that be? Or do you have any like rituals beforehand that you like to do to sort of warm yourself up?
Yeah, well, this is a big question, and it's a common one too. It's the question about performance anxiety and nerves, and how do we get better at that? And the way I would sort of, there's so many different ways we can talk about this, but I'll just pick one to talk about right now, and it's called exposure therapy, and it has to do with, for example, if I asked you to jump out of an airplane right now with me this second, would you be nervous about that?
Yeah,
Have you ever jumped out of an airplane before, gone skydiving?
I have not.
No, and neither have I. And it sounds petrifying to me. And there's a real risk there. Like, what if my parachute doesn't open, right?
Yeah.
So, number one, the reason I use this example is we have to talk about real fear or real threats versus perceived threats and things that our squirrels are making up. In reality, jumping out of an airplane and going skydiving has less risk, probably. I don't know the actual statistics, but I'm guessing, than me driving downtown for a concert tonight. I probably am more likely to get injured on the 110 than I am jumping out of an airplane. I think that's probably accurate. The chute's probably going to open. There's a trainer attached to me. It's all good. Nothing's going to go wrong. But it's super petrifying because my brain is coming up with all these scenarios that could go wrong. So we have to deal with perceived threats versus real threats, first of all. That's one way to deal with nerves. The second way, and this is the exposure therapy, is I have a friend, Joanne, who is a pilot and also a skydiver, and she does skydiving all the time. I don't know how many times she's jumped out of airplanes, but it's a lot. And she has done it so many times that not only does she not get nervous and not worry about the possible negative outcomes, she actually finds it exhilarating, and it's a fun thing for her to do. She's actually taking that energy and shifting it from nervousness into exhilaration. Nervousness into exhilaration. Same body, same brain, same activity. She's completely flipped the script on what it feels like to do that. So let's talk about musicians taking an audition or doing a performance. What if we applied the same ideological thoughts to the performance of the audition as we do jumping out of the plane? Okay, we've got to deal with the threat. What's going to happen? Are people going to come running from the stage and drag me away if I play a wrong note? No, nothing bad's going to happen. What's the worst that could happen? And then the exposure therapy is, hey, if you want to get good at auditions or performing, you have to do them, and you have to do them a lot, and you have to do them with strategy so that you don't freak out all of the time. If you have people who are taking auditions or performances and getting nervous every single time, well, that's where like mentorship and coaching can come in, or that's where doing mindset work can come in, and visualizations. So there are tools available to us. So that's one of the ways that I talk about performance anxiety and helping people understand it, understand the threat, real or perceived, and exposure therapy.
Mhm. Well, assuming that, a listener takes your advice and, they do the slow practice, they're prepared for an audition, they go their best, they do their best in it, and they, have positive affirmations beforehand, and they just still are frustrated with their, um, progress, and they feel like, there's a lot of like stress over making money, um, not living up to expectations. How do you sort of how do you stay motivated in a time like that where it feels like, oh, I'm like, why am I even doing this if I'm not really getting anywhere with it?
It's a great question too. So you're familiar with this idea? There's no room at the top, right? Have you heard that phrase?
I
There's
have not.
no room at the top. There's not enough jobs and there's too many players. Does that sound familiar to you?
No, but I think I get the idea.
It's similar to the idea of like there's no way to make enough money as a musician to live. There's no way to like get to the top and be successful.
Mhm.
And I've taken 20 auditions and I haven't won, or I've done all these performances, but I still can't get somebody to buy tickets to my chamber group. Whatever it is for you, it's what I call a limiting assumption. that there's no room at the top. There's no way I could be successful. I'm frustrated. How will I make enough money? Okay, so that's the mindset that we're trying to deal with. And here's one answer to that. I mean, there's a million ways to look at all this stuff, but here's how I look at it. If you took 100 musicians, what do you play an instrument?
I do. I play cello.
Cello. Okay. If 100 cello players show up to audition for the New York Philharmonic, how many of them will make it out of the first round?
Probably 10, maybe.
Exactly the number I was thinking, 10. So 90 players just got cut right out. So those people advanced into semis or finals. They're in the top. They're in the upper echelon of the pool of 100 players. What that means is that 90% of the cellists that showed up for that New York Philharmonic audition did not have what it takes to deliver at the critical moment. So 10 players went on, 90 did not. Out of those 10 players, how many make the finals?
Less than 5.
Yeah, three probably, three or four maybe. And then how many will win?
2 at most.
Well, if there's one position, it'll be one,
Yeah.
or sometimes zero. No one will get hired. So how many people are we talking about? 3, 5 at the top? There's plenty of room at the top. There's plenty of room at the top for great players who understand pitch, sound, rhythm, time, who've done the mental preparation with mock auditions to present at the critical moment. There's so much room. And the committee is dying for those players to do well. Please be the one that plays great. We're dying to hire somebody. There's nobody up there. You know where there's no room? At the bottom. There's no room at the bottom because it's crowded. The other 90% is down there. So your job, if you're getting frustrated, is to figure out what do you need to do to get from the bottom into that top 10, 5, 3%. That's your whole job as a musician, is to figure out how to do that. And that incorporates mental health as well, making sure that you can do that without sacrificing your actual health, your body, and your relationships with your family and your friends, your time, your energy, your enjoyment, and that number one resource, your enthusiasm.
Mhm. You seem to have, really know what you're talking about. And you joined the Colorado Symphony in 2007. Uh, so if you were to go back to 2007, what's one piece of advice you'd tell yourself back then?
Well, so I was in Charleston. I was principal in Charleston, and then I was associate principal in Dallas, and then I won the principal in Colorado, and then I won LA Phil. So by the time I hit Colorado, I'd had a few jobs under my belt and had some experience, and I kind of understood what I did well, and I understood what I did not do well.
Mm.
And I also had a pretty good amount of confidence and also momentum. And so I think this is maybe the answer to the question for you then that's occurring to me is going from Colorado to LA Phil, not to mention that it was a huge, it was a 210% pay increase from that job. That's not small, but it was also moving from a really, really, really good regional orchestra to a world-class orchestra, which is the LA Phil. If I could go back and tell myself something, I would say, that momentum that you've been developing, winning those other jobs, keep focusing on that. Keep fanning the flames of that momentum and that enthusiasm. And that's what's going to propel you into this next job. Because by the way, my resume has very nice things on it, but what my resume doesn't mention is I took 40 auditions in my career and I did not win 40 jobs. So that means I lost most or failed at most of the auditions I took. The good news is every audition I took, I came away with a puzzle piece. I learned something from the failure and I snapped that puzzle piece into place. And the good thing about a puzzle is there's only so many pieces. And after a while, you collect all the puzzle piece and then you snap the final one in and everything clicks and it works. So I guess if I had advice for my younger self or for players who are considering something like this as a career, embrace the momentum, which means you got to start moving in the first place. Take auditions, exposure therapy, right?
Mhm.
And make sure you learn from your failures. This is so important. Flip the script on your failure. Realize that every setback is an opportunity. The bigger the setback, the bigger the opportunity. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow. That's why I call my coaching program Honesty Pill, because it's time to swallow that pill and say, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to let go of? What can I double down on that's working? So that would be my advice. Momentum, learn from your mistakes.
Could you elaborate on how you would advise fanning the flame to keep the momentum going?
Oh, there's so many ways to do it. um, okay, here's an example. Um, when you are in the audition, and I guess I don't know. I hope it's okay. We're talking about auditions, but this is where I spend a lot of my brain. Um, if you are taking particular, like what's an excerpt that you dread? That's hard for you to play. Don Juan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Don Juan. If you played Don Juan at 10 auditions in a row and they all went terribly, you
Mhm.
would probably have a pretty strong mental picture of what your bad Don Juan sounds like. Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay. What if I had you, if you were coaching with me and I had you recording yourself and I was helping you and we were practicing and creating some tools to help it work, and we captured a recording of you in your studio, in your room, playing Don Juan great. And you heard that and you're like, oh, that's me. I'm able to play it. Okay. Here's how you can fan the flames of momentum. I actually call this the Patronus effect from Harry Potter. You guys remember when Harry Potter was time traveling with the time spinner thing, and he saw himself do the huge Patronus that knocked out all the bad guys, and Hermione says, "Harry, how did you do that spell? That's a master wizard spell." His response is, "Well, I did it because I saw myself do it and I knew I could do it. So it just happened." Patronus effect. This is the same thing with hearing a recording of you playing great. If you can capture yourself playing that excerpt one time, great. That's not a fluke. That's not you playing over your head. That is what you sound like when the clouds part and you get out of your own way. That's your true potential. So if you can look at that and listen to it over and over and say, that's me. I am a master. I'm great at Don Juan. That's fanning the flames of your momentum and your enthusiasm. And then when you walk on stage for that 11th audition, maybe, just maybe, you'll have trained your brain enough to get out of your own way and let that Don Juan come through. And that is what's going to win you that position, or at least have you play great in that round. So that's one way that I like to have people experience evolution and momentum and mindset, is with this idea of capturing yourself on a recording, playing great when you got out of your own way.
Great.
The Patronus effect is what I call it.
Thank you. We do ask our guests a couple questions that are just solely mental health, a little bit less related to, the questions have been related to Honesty Pill. Um, but before I get into the questions, I wanted to give you a chance to sort of talk about your project and see if it can appeal to our audience.
Oh, great. Sure. Well, I have many projects. If you go to honestypill.com, the first thing I would invite your guests to do is to make sure you join my mailing list. And there's a little pop up that'll happen. I'll give you a copy of a PDF that has some of the books behind me, some of the best reading material for musicians that I recommend, some really good stuff there. There's also a podcast you can click on, and there's all sorts of interviews from orchestral musicians and opera musicians and musician entrepreneurs and composers and conductors, just a real cross section of the music industry, and how you realize that we're all kind of struggling with the same sort of challenges and inspirations. So you can listen to the podcast. For auditioners, I have a program called the Audition Accelerator, which is something we can talk about, and a few other things, but that's the first place I would go.
Great. Thank you. So a couple questions. Do you teach trumpet every now and again, or do you just?
I do teach some private lessons and coaching. I work mostly with musicians in group programs. And remember, I said marathon, not a sprint. I like to do extended experiences with people because that's where real impact and change can occur. But I do teach one-off lessons on occasion.
And so, through your students, which I assume would be on the younger side, um, what's like the most common issue that you see with them regarding mental health?
Oh, they're completely stressed out and overwhelmed in most of the time. And
What do you do to try to help them with that?
well, it's complicated. And dealing with anxiety is a huge issue for musicians, and you can get into that state where you forget that you're even overwhelmed, and it becomes a habit. The first thing I try and do is go through some meditation and visualizations and sort of get them to step outside that space for just a second, and then we try and make those seconds longer and longer until we develop some tools that can help us regain that space. There's some meditations that I love to recommend to people. Kenny Werner, Effortless Mastery, is a really good one.
Do you think there's enough mental health resources for classical music right now?
No way. Nope, not even close. We had not even scratching the surface. I think it's actually almost criminal that when you're a music student, I mean, any student, but a music student, you should have a nutrition coach. You should have a physical fitness coach, a financial coach, a trumpet or cello coach, a chamber music coach. You should have an entrepreneur advocacy coach, and you should definitely have a mental health coach.
I see. So what's something in particular that our project could sort of provide to help with those issues?
That your project could? Well, I think the fact that you're asking these questions is a really great place to start. And I think that if you asked, I mean, ask every musician in the LA Phil or any other orchestra or any other arts organization similar questions, I think you're going to find most of the musicians are going to say the same thing. Dealing with overwhelm and anxiety as a performing musician artist is so common. I'm so grateful that you're doing this, and I think it's really important work. And I would urge you to keep asking these questions.
Great. Thank you, Christopher. Just to the audience, we've updated our website. We have a lot more resources now. We have a new scholarship where you can get a free set of strings. And we're also starting a fund that's designed just for mental health resources for classical musicians. And that'll be up early next year. So thank you again, Christopher, and thank you for watching.
My pleasure. Take care.